debate you'll see only on 5.
In the race for U.S. Senate, 3 frontrunners face-to-face competing for your vote.
400 people are at this South Florida event. Millions are watching across the state, and it starts right now.
Dedicated to enhancing the well-being of Florida seniors and preserving American democracy. Florida Philanthropic Network, building philanthropy to build a better Florida. Now, from the beautiful campus of Nova Southeastern University in Davie, Florida, Decision 2010 Before You Vote presents the candidates for U.S. Senate in Florida. And now, your host, from WFOR-TV CBS 4, Antonio Mora.
Welcome to the debate for the United States Senate. Tonight's event is being broadcast by a number of stations across the state in order to connect with as many voters as possible. The 3 candidates vying for this Senate seat are Governor Charlie Crist, the independent candidate, United States Representative Kendrick Meek, a Democrat, and the former Speaker of the Florida House, Marco Rubio, a Republican. The candidates will each have 1 minute and 15 seconds to respond to questions, and they will be signaled by a clock located on the stage. Our panel tonight includes William March with the Tampa Tribune, Miriam Marcus with the Miami Herald, and my colleague, CBS 4 political reporter Michael Williams. We have asked the audience to hold its applause and the candidates to follow the guidelines presented to them before this broadcast. Our time is limited and the issues are endless, so we'll get started. Mr. Rubio, followed by Mr. Meek. We will begin with the issue Florida voters care most about, jobs. Our unemployment rate is 2 percentage points higher than the national average. Nearly 1 in 8 Floridians who want to work can't get a job. You opposed the federal stimulus, which by all accounts saved the jobs of firefighters, police officers, and teachers. If we had not had that stimulus money, wouldn't things have been worse? And what would you do differently to make sure that Floridians get jobs?
Well, first of all, thank you tonight for having this debate and all of you for being a part of it. Let's talk about the stimulus package first. It was called stimulus for a reason. It was supposed to stimulate the economy. It has failed to do that. In fact, since the stimulus passed, over 1 million Americans have lost their jobs. Over 200,000 Floridians have lost their jobs. And the unemployment rate, both in Florida and nationally, is substantially higher than it was before it passed. It has failed to do everything it was supposed to do. On the other hand, it has stimulated the national debt to the tune of over $800 billion and climbing, of money that our children and our grandchildren will work their whole life to pay back. There were other alternatives to the stimulus. It wasn't about doing the stimulus or nothing at all. And it begins by acknowledging that jobs are not created by politicians. U.S. senators don't create jobs. Presidents don't create jobs. Jobs are created by everyday people from all walks of life that start a business or expand an existing business. And what we need are leaders in Washington, government leaders, that will create an environment where doing that, where starting a business or expanding an existing business is easier, not harder. That's not what we've gotten. Over the last 18 months, from the stimulus package to the threats of tax increases to Obamacare, everything that has happened over there has made it harder, not easier, for jobs to be created. And that's the most important thing the next U.S. Senator from Florida needs to realize. It distinguishes me from my opponents in this race.
Mr. Crist, as Mr. Rubio points out, the unemployment rate in the state of Florida has soared during your tenure as governor. Why should Florida voters trust you to get them jobs?
Because I think it's very important that the Florida voters understand that this has been a tough 4 years. Probably the toughest 4 years in the history of our state besides the Great Depression as it relates to the economy. It is easy to govern when money is flowing. It is hard to govern when money is tight. It was important, I think, to take the Recovery Act money for one simple reason. Because I care about the people of our state. I care about you. Now, if my opponent, Marco Rubio, had been your governor and hadn't taken the stimulus money, 20,000 educators tonight would not be employed. Another 60,000 of our fellow Floridians would not have an income, would not have that paycheck coming to them and their family every week in order to be able to put food on their table. That's unconscionable to me. That's not compassionate. That's dispassionate. I think it's important that we understand what else the stimulus did. People don't talk about it, but it cut $300 billion in tax cuts. That was important for us to remember. And how to do it? By investing in things that were important to people, like new home buyers. You know, I talk to members that are in the housing industry every day in the Sunshine State. And some homes are starting to sell now because first-time home buyers got that $8,000 tax credit. Other things that the stimulus did was invest in infrastructure. We all know that if infrastructure is invested in, You get more jobs.
All right, your time. Mr. Meek, you, as opposed to many Democrats in Congress who believe the Bush tax cuts should not expire even for wealthier Americans, including President Obama's former OMB director, budget director, Peter Orszag, who wrote that it would amount to the largest tax increase in American history, and he said no one wants to make an already stagnating job market worse, which is exactly what would happen if the cuts expire as planned. You want those cuts for wealthier Americans to expire. You also have not proposed any cuts in taxes for larger corporations, even though corporate taxes in this country are the highest in the developed world. How will that create jobs for Floridians?
Thank you so very much for the question, and thank you for moderating this debate and the questioners. I'm glad that we're having this debate tonight because it's about the future of this country and also the future of our state. I think it's important when we look at the stimulus, we have to look at it as a tool that set the platform to stop us from going into a depression. When we look at tax cuts, the last debate I talked about it, and for those of you who did not see the last debate, Mr. Rubio and Mr. Crist stand side by side in making sure that the special interests and the super wealthy get their tax cut, even those who ship jobs overseas. I pointed out the fact that middle-class families under the income of $250,000 would have to pay $6,000 a year on that particular tax cut for those Floridians or for those Americans to get a tax cut. So I'm for middle-class tax cuts. I'm for child credits. I'm for tax cuts that are going to help people get back on their feet. What they're advocating is tax cuts for the super wealthy and those that are privileged in this country that did not ask for a tax cut in the beginning. We had a different economic time during the time those tax cuts were given. Now we're in a super deficit, and they believe in trickle-down economics that did not work when it was first introduced and will not work now. I'm protecting those that work hard for their money every day.
Thank you, Mr. Meek. Next question from Michael Williams.
Turning to the federal deficit, nonpartisan economists argue that to avoid medium or long-term federal bankruptcy, either taxes must be raised on all Americans or huge entitlement reforms must beginning with Social Security. My question to you, when we hear more and more that anything else is a political lie, is simply this. Beginning with you, Mr. Crist. Facing that stark choice, do you raise taxes if it comes down to that choice or begin to cut benefits, and if so, precisely where and how?
I think you do what we've done in Florida. Now is the time to cut taxes. This is where the Speaker and I agree. We have to cut taxes to put more of your hard-earned money into your pocket. And we have to do it for small businesses, too. These aren't the wealthy. These are the entrepreneurs that make a difference and hire people and create jobs throughout our state and our country. I think it's important to have those tax cuts come about, make sure that we have them going forward, make sure that you have more of your hard-earned dollars in your pocket, instead of having government spend that money in a way that probably is not in your best interest and probably wasteful.
Mr. Crist, specifically to the question, either the choice economists argue is to raise taxes eventually or cut benefits. Given that choice, first and foremost, which is your choice? Cut Social Security benefits or raise taxes to cover those benefits for Floridians?
Neither one, and I mean to be blunt here. That's a false choice. I think what we have to do is be smart and be prudent and protect our seniors. This is an issue in this campaign. You know, my Republican opponent, Marco Rubio, talks about raising the age of eligibility or privatizing Social Security. That's not what our seniors deserve or want or should have. It's a promise that was made to them, and I'm the only one in this election who has said that if elected your next U.S. Senator, to our senior citizens, I'm talking to you tonight, I will protect and preserve Social Security as we know it today, because it was a promise that was made to you. Once we get through this difficult time, we can do what we did in Florida. I'm a fiscal conservative. I slashed the Florida budget more than any governor in the history of the state by $7.4 billion. And we did it, Mike, without hurting education, without hurting seniors, without hurting health care. We did it by being smart, by being targeted, and doing the way I would want to do it in Washington if I have the honor of your vote.
Mr. Meek, even leading House Democrats this year, beginning with Steny Hoyer from Maryland, a powerful House Democrat, acknowledged earlier in the year that we would have to put everything on the table eventually, including Social Security. You, like the governor, have not talked much about those tough choices. You've said preserve it, but specifically to the point, if it comes down to having to raise taxes, as economists say we'll have to do, or cut Social Security benefits, which is your choice? And if you cut or change benefits, precisely how do you do it? How do you answer that question after now running for this office for the past nearly 2 years?
Well, you know I've been around the longest, so I'll put it this way. I think it's very, very important to pay attention to what the governor just said. He said very little. He said what we've been hearing all through the years, through Washington, D.C., let's cut taxes, and everything will work out. Well, let me just tell you something. When it comes down to these entitlement programs, we have to be able to weed out the waste. And when we look at the health care legislation that was just passed, we spend more for health care, but we're not healthier because of it. It's the second largest deficit reduction legislation that has been passed in the Congress in several years. Crist wants to repeal it. Marco Rubio wants to repeal it. It's very, very important to know that we have to make tough decisions. Now, when it comes down to dealing with this issue on how we get there rolling up our sleeves, making sure that we work on the issues that are facing this country. The very tax cut that the governor and Marco is talking about are tax cuts that are going to take this country into a deeper hole. $700 billion for the super wealthy in this country will bring about the fall of many of these programs if we don't make tough decisions. The next senator of Florida, a couple more seconds. The next senator of Florida must be a protector, not of the special interests, but of the people of this state and the country.
I'm not hearing from either one of you what's going to happen to Social Security when we know that full benefits won't be able to be paid out in 2037. So neither of you is proposing any specific solution about changing the age of eligibility or about changing the formula for benefits for anyone.
Since we have, you can take the governor in order, and
sure, we'll go. With all due respect, report after report does indicate what you just said, and that's important for people to hear. Reports indicate that Social Security is solvent until at least 2037 or 2041. Yet there are people like Marco Rubio who want to tinker with it. It doesn't make sense. It's one of the few programs in Washington, D.C. that actually works. And typical of Washington, D.C., it's what politicians attack.
But it seems like it won't work in barely more than a generation, Mr. Meek.
Let me just say that it's important that we expand middle-class jobs. It goes down to the tax policy. Both of these gentlemen want to give tax cuts to companies that ship jobs overseas. I want to give tax cuts to companies that stay here. Expanding the middle-class workforce in Florida will help the Social Security Trust Fund. I think it's very, very important. 40% of Floridians will go into poverty without Social Security. I said once before, and I'll say it again. If someone wants to change Social Security, they're going to have to go through me. The bottom line is I take my orders from the people that I represent and the people that sign petitions to place me on the ballot and those that will vote for me to protect them and not the special interests.
Mr. Rubio, we get from either candidate heard hard specifics after this long campaign. Let me also put the question to you. You have been assailed for saying that we will need to look at entitlement reform over the long term and have said before in interviews that anything less is, you haven't used the word a political lie, but is simply someone wanting to be elected to office. What specifically do you propose? Higher taxes or begin to make reforms? And precisely what are the tough reforms you are willing to begin considering making?
Michael, first of all, I'd ask for your indulgence for a little extra time because I have to both set the record straight and answer your question since I haven't spoken in a while. Let me set the record straight first. The governor has repeated something that is now an old political trick in America, and that is let's go out and scare seniors about Social Security. Here are the facts about where I stand on Social Security. If you're over the age of 55, if you are a current beneficiary or about to retire, I do not believe there should be any changes to Social Security for you. There's a lot of reasons why I feel that way, but one of them is sitting in the audience today. It's my mom who turns 80 years old 2 weeks from today. Social Security is the sole source of income that she has. She depends on it. I would never support any changes to Social Security that would adversely impact her or people in her demographic. Now, what you haven't heard today from any of these two candidates here on the stage is a real plan to solve Social Security. What you've heard from Governor Crist is that there are no problems with Social Security. That's just not true. The fact of the matter is that for years now, Congress has been raiding the Social Security Trust Fund. Any money that's left over after they pay out benefits, they take it, and they used to pay for all sorts of things. Republicans and Democrats have done it. And the fact is that by year 2037, let me tell you what the year 2037 is. That's the year my daughter turns pretty much my age. It's not that far away. And the closer we get to that year, the harder it is to solve these problems. So here's what I said we need to do. Younger workers, younger people like myself, people 20, 30, 40 years from retirement, need to understand that we're going to have to discuss different options on the table. whether it's extending the retirement age, as it's happening now, again, for younger workers, whether it's looking at indexing, again, for younger workers, not for people that are on the system today. Unfortunately,
indexing meaning precisely
the way the initial benefit is set, to a progressive price index or something like it. Again, these are options. You know, the Congressional Budget Office has issued 30-some-odd recommendations. Amnesty for illegal aliens, which is Governor Crist's plan, which, by the way, during one of the last debates, he said Robert Reich, the former labor secretary under Bill Clinton, supported his plan. Someone needs to tell Robert Reich, because he says he's never heard of it. Right. And in fact, he thinks your plan, Governor, makes it worse, not better.
Time. We'll move on to Miriam Marcus of the Miami Herald.
All right, so let's do a quick question of what would you say to this voter? Stimulus, we've talked about. There are different scenarios in the stimulus, and each one has a different reaction from the taxpayers. We'll start with Mr. Meek. What do you tell a small businesswoman, an importer? She imports from Colombia, and she is trying very hard to hire more workers. But unfortunately, in her mind, she looks at the federal stimulus, and what she sees is all the money having gone to, or a lot of it, to help labor unions hire more workers or keep teachers and police and firefighters, all good, important, very important people hired, but nothing for her. What do you tell a small businesswoman like that?
Well,
it
was in three parts: A, tax cuts; B, infrastructure, and and money that went really to states to be able to balance the budget. We look at these projects that are ongoing. Some small businesses have been able to take advantage of it. Some small business individuals have received a tax cut from the stimulus plan. The stimulus is the past. The future is right now in the United States Senate. Someone appointed by the governor and someone that's a member of Mr. Rubio's party, Senator Lemieux, did not lift a finger to move the jobs bill forward, or the small business bill forward in the United States Senate. And the bottom line is this: if Marco Rubio was the United States Senator, he would have voted against the stimulus. He wouldn't have had a proposal, because he wouldn't have been able to get it up in the Senate. The real issue is this: someone who is willing to take on those issues. For that small businesswoman or businessman, I am there. Why I stand up for tax cuts for small businesses, and I look forward to doing that when I become the next United States Senator. But you look at the stimulus was to help start infrastructure projects, help start green initiatives, help start, give tax cuts to Floridians so that they can put groceries in the refrigerator, and also make sure that we provide a baseline for the government to be able to carry out the services that not only that business person, but other people in other communities will be able to take advantage of: police, fire, and teachers.
Mr. Rubio, you're next. What would you tell a hotel worker who is cleaning rooms, and her husband has been in construction for the last 10 years, and he's lost his job the last 18 months, and they're counting on that unemployment extension? It's part of the stimulus money. And all she thinks about is, well, Mr. Rubio just wants to extend tax cuts, but not worry about those who are already unemployed.
Well, two things I would say. The first is that that's not an accurate reflection of what my position has been in the past. I have said with unemployment benefits that they should be extended. We should just pay for them, as has been proposed by some in Congress. Identify some area in the budget.
So where would that be?
How about unspent TARP money or unspent stimulus money? There's all sorts of money all over the budget that has not yet been spent, that's already added to the debt. Don't double add to the debt, or find savings. I don't think anyone would argue that you're not going to be able to find savings after the spending spree that this administration's gone on over the last 18 months. They have grown the national debt by $3 trillion over the last 18 months. It's an atrocious number, which leads me back to a point that was discussed earlier in the choice. Michael, you asked a question about choosing between tax cuts or spending reduction. That's a false choice. I'll tell you why. The reason why our debt's growing in America is not because Americans are not paying enough in taxes. The Obama administration and the current congressional leadership have proposed a budget that, if you extend it out over 10 years, has massive tax increases, but it also has massive spending increases. They are so massive that they will double the national debt by the middle of this decade and triple it by the end of it, where over $900 billion a year, maybe even $1 trillion, will be borrowed every year just to pay the interest on the debt. Half of that interest will go overseas to China and bondholders elsewhere. No generation of Americans has ever done this to their children.
Mr. Crist.
Hi.
Hi. So what would you tell a doctor who treats Medicare patients, and he's looking at the stimulus money and going, you know, all this, there has been no help for me, and meanwhile Congress has gone ahead and passed health care reform, and my Medicare payments have not grown in the last X many years, and every year Congress decides to postpone the inevitable vote to try to contain those costs.
What would I tell that doctor? That you need to send an independent to the United States Senate, because otherwise you're going to end up with either a hard right Republican or a hard left Democrat who can't find a middle ground if it stared them in the face. This is the problem with Washington. This is the problem with Washington, D.C., not being able to get things done. They are stuck in gridlock. They can't get together. If either of these two guys go to Washington, they're going to get in their corner when they get there, and they're going to fight everything that makes common sense that needs to be done to help the doctor, to help the hotel worker, to help all of the people in Florida.
Though, I mean, that's a good talking point on independence, but how would you deal with the issue of Medicare payments? I mean, that is a recurring issue.
Yeah, by working with the other people in the Congress for a common sense solution to get things done for the American people. That's what's frustrating the people who are watching tonight. All they hear from Washington is, we got to do it either our way or you got to take the highway. You know, it happened with health care, with Obamacare, which I oppose. And what happened is that the Democrats, unfortunately, just rammed the thing through. You know, that's what Mr. Meek voted for. What we have to do is say, look, you know, we need to do what's right for the people. You know, the president started out, Miriam, originally saying, I'm going to work across the aisle. I'm going to reach across the aisle and make sure that we get everybody involved in these solutions that matter to the people of America. It hasn't happened. It needs to happen. Whether it's the Medicare issue with the doctor, whether it's the hotel worker, every Floridian in this audience and watching tonight, they need to have somebody who go up there and say, enough is enough. I'm running against the entire system to stop this stuff. It's not working for our country.
Thank you. William March of the Tampa Tribune.
Thank you. Mr. Rubio, on health care, throughout your campaign, you've condemned the Obama administration's health care reform plan. And as I understand it, any plan that requires that all Americans have health insurance, even though one of your prominent supporters, Mitt Romney, implemented just such a plan in Massachusetts. This being the case, what's your solution for the system we have now? For most Americans, it's expensive, it's inundated with red tape, and administered at the mercy of insurance company bureaucrats. What would you do if not what Mitt Romney and Barack Obama have done?
Well, William, as you know, and others that know may not know, if they go to our website, we are the only candidate running for U.S. Senate that's actually offered a concrete plan of what I will do if I'm elected. I'm going to take your question in two parts. First, let me tell you what's wrong with the health care bill that's passed. It's broken every promise that they made. When they offered up this bill, they said that if you were happy with your insurance coverage, no one would lose their coverage. And yet now we have learned that up to 69% of Americans that are currently insured could lose their coverage. We were told that it would make Medicare more solvent and stronger. We know that that's not true, and in fact, people are now losing their Medicare Advantage plans. And they told us that it would lower the cost of health care in America. That's also not true. Health care costs are going up all across the board. Now, what I've proposed, and I've said from the beginning, is that the health insurance industry in America is upside down. The health care consumer, the people that buy health insurance in America, they have no choices. You usually get your insurance, if you're lucky, from your employer. And the only choice you have is the doctor's name out of a book. What I would propose is to change that around, to allow every individual in America to buy health insurance from any company in America that will sell it to you, even if they're in another state. By allowing every individual in America that buys health insurance for themselves to have the same tax benefit that their employer has when their employer buys it for them. And by allowing small companies and associations to pool together and buy insurance with the same tax benefit from any company in America that will sell it to their members.
Mr. Crist, you've also said you oppose the Obama health reform plan and would vote to repeal it, repair it, replace it, some of the above, fix it. You've said it costs too much, and you've deplored the cuts to the Medicare Advantage plan that a lot of people in Florida use. But your proposal as governor for solving health care problems, the Cover Florida plan, has provided help to only about 6,200 people in Florida. What contribution do you have to this debate, if not that?
A lot. I think that Obamacare was off the charts, was wrong. It taxed too much, has mandates that are probably unconstitutional, and it's not the way to go. And it was rammed through. Now, what did we do in Florida to try to get things better? we passed a plan that you referred to called Cover Florida. And you talk about the fact that only 6,200 or so people have signed up for it. It took health insurance during a month period from an average of about $700 a month for the uninsured, or those who have recently lost their job, and reduced it to about $150 a month. Now, Wendy, I met with a lady just last month in Century Village here in Boca Raton, right near where we are tonight, who came up to me and said, "Governor, thank you for passing Cover Florida." And what she told me was that she wasn't able to afford coverage for her son, who had recently been diagnosed with cancer. She was able to get coverage because of Cover Florida. He got his treatments, and he's now in remission. Now, that may be only one family, but that one family and that one person and that one son mean a lot to me. This is the kind of compassion you deserve in a public servant. I have been your governor. I can, you can trust what I will tell you. And I think it's important that we have people in public office that understand, even if it's one person, it matters to that person, that family, and that young boy.
Mr. Meek, let's turn the question around a little bit. Boeing Corporation just recently announced very large health care premium increases for its 90,000 employees, the Obamacare plan. A lot of other Americans are seeing increases in their employer-provided health care plans. And according to projections from the CBO, those increases will probably get worse. At the same time, the plan did cut the Medicare Advantage plan, which a lot of Floridians depend on, and just to top it off, most Floridians in polls say they're opposed to it. How do you defend it to them?
Well, I can tell you, Wendy, the real issue here is that Floridians are uninsured. A number of them, 3,500 a week, lose their insurance. I think it's very important to note that something needed to be done about health care. The last election cycle was all about health care. Republicans and Democrats had a plan. The plan was followed through on. The governor calls it Obamacare. I see messaging. You're calling it Obamacare. I'm pretty sure Marco is going to call it Obamacare. The real issue is that it's health care. And when it comes down to it, we have people right now that have rights that they did not have before the passage of that health care plan. Now, folks can act, like everything was fine, because the reason why it was an issue in the last election is because businesses were going out of business, small and large businesses, and something needed to be done. I can tell you right now, when it comes down to Medicare, it's done more to help Medicare take away from insurance companies. And right now, insurance companies are playing chicken with Floridians and Americans. Yes, they want to jack up premiums and co-pays right now. What was the excuse last year? And the year before that? And the year before that? So the bottom line is the next United States Senator, which I believe will be me, has to be someone that will stand up against these special interest companies and not cave into them. And I'm just shocked to hear, now the new lingo from the governor talking about Obamacare. I wonder if he said that to the president when he was walking with him on the beach.
Thank you,
I think
Mr.
it's
Meek.
important to know that you got to have a leader that will stand up regardless of what the poll says when it comes down to standing up for Floridians. I mean, it is really mind-boggling to me how, Governor, you can stand there and start throwing out accusations saying, "Oh, Obamacare," and
Governor, I will give you a very quick rebuttal to the attack.
Thank you. When we were on the beach, we were protecting Florida, and that's what I talked to him about.
But you're for offshore oil drilling.
I didn't interrupt you.
You're for offshore oil drilling.
No, I'm not. I'm opposed to it. He's the guy that wants offshore oil drilling.
Now you are.
You got him
now
confused.
You are. I don't know. I mean, you were with Sarah Palin a couple of years ago saying drill, baby, drill.
I never said drill, baby, drill.
You were clapping.
I was there to support my friend John McCain.
Oh, well, okay. I will interrupt you both here because we need to go to a break. We're going to take a very quick break before we start another round of questions for the candidates. Campaign 2010, before you vote. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Please don't go away.
Where will tomorrow's leaders come from? Nova Southeastern University, 130 undergraduate and graduate degree programs, a Fort Lauderdale main campus, and 6 locations throughout Florida. Nova.edu.
I pledge to be there for you when disaster strikes, to guide you through your claim,
to offer personalized coverage from a choice of insurance companies,
to explain your policy and treat you with respect.
That's the Trusted Choice Pledge. We've put it in writing.
Home, auto, business, life.
We are Trusted Choice, independent insurance agents in your hometown.
To find a Trusted Choice agent near you, visit trustedchoice.com.
Vision, leadership, public service. The Florida League of Mayors, the trusted voice of our communities.
After tonight's debate, sponsored by AARP, visit aarp.org/yourvote to find out where the candidates stand. Because it's your right, your decision, your vote. Paid for by AARP.
The Florida Press Association is the trade association for Florida's daily and weekly newspapers, providing communities across Florida with the news and information relevant to their life in print and online. Providing essential information, creative opportunities, and a meaningful forum for opinions, we are Leadership Florida, educating, inspiring, and engaging Florida's leaders.
Welcome back to the debate for the United States Senate from the campus of Nova Southeastern University in Davie. This event is being seen by voters across the state. We will get right back to the questions, and we're going to get right back to where we ended that half hour with Congressman Meek telling the governor that he had flip-flopped on some issues. And that is something that your opponents have accused you of doing. In making your run as an independent, you changed some of the positions you had held as a Republican in the past. In one of Aesop's fables, he talked about the bats and the beasts and the birds, and how the beasts and the birds were in a fight and the bat wouldn't pick a side. In the end, the moral of the story was that he who is neither one thing or another has no friends. Who are you now, and how will you vote when you go to the Senate?
I'm the same guy I've always been. I'm Charlie Crist, and I am a fiscal conservative and a social moderate. You know, I believe that we have to spend our money wisely. We have to make sure that your taxes are low. We have to make sure that small businesses have the opportunity to provide more jobs for people across the state of Florida. I also believe in live and let live. You know, I'm running against a guy in Marco Rubio when it comes to issues related to women. Believes that a woman's right to choose ought to be taken away by overturning, literally, overturning Roe versus Wade. I don't think that's right for Florida. I don't think it's right for women. I'm also a guy who believes in protecting our senior citizens. Again, Marco Rubio talks about raising the age of eligibility for Social Security and putting all these things, including privatization, on the table. As it relates to me, the only things that are on the table as it relates to Social Security are making sure that other people's hands stay out of it. We have a duty, in my view, to protect it, to preserve it for the American people and the people of our state. I'm a guy who believes in common sense, not nonsense. I am running against an extreme right-wing candidate who believes in taking away women's rights, punishing seniors, and punishing teachers. And that's just not right.
Mr. Meek, your voting record is almost identical to Nancy Pelosi's. Your positions could have been written, your platform could have been written by the White House. At a time when the administration's most significant positions are extremely unpopular among Floridians, barely supported by a third of the population. Almost two-thirds of the American population thinks we're on the wrong track. Why should they elect someone who is so closely associated with the administration's policies?
Well, I can tell you, as it relates to policy, it's policy that I believe in. I think it's very important that people have health care. I think it's very important that we stand up to Wall Street because the deregulators on both sides of me. That's what got us in this mess in the first place. I believe in housing reform, that I put legislation within the housing bill that went after those that attack Floridians and taking them into foreclosure fraudulently. I look forward to standing with things that work. Offshore oil drilling, I was against the administration's proposal. As it relates to NASA, I stood up and it got better from the administration. And when it comes down to fighting for Floridians, I'm on their side. I think it's very, very important to note that I'm standing between two individuals that have been in the room together, dealing with the state budget, dealing with the issues that are facing Floridians. They know they've had conversations. When minimum wage was up here in Florida, I was the only one on this stage that stood for minimum wage for working people. When it came down to health care, I'm the only person that actually fought for health care. When it came down to fighting for our environment and sticking with our environment with green jobs initiatives, I'm the only one. And I'm the only candidate that will stand up on behalf of Floridians and not the special interests.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio.
That's why it's important I become your next United States Senator.
Mr. Rubio, you are running on what many commentators have described as one of the more anti-Latino platforms around. You support the Arizona immigration law, you oppose the DREAM Act, you oppose a pathway to citizenship, you support English as an official language. All those issues are issues that appeal to the most conservative elements of the Republican Party, to the Tea Party, and it has made you a darling of the Tea Party across the country and got you enormous support from the Tea Party. How can Florida voters feel comfortable that you are not beholden to interests from without the state in the Tea Party, the most conservative elements of the Tea Party?
First of all, let me tell you, I'm the only candidate running that has a platform on his website that actually outlines specific ideas of what I will stand for. Now, let me tell you something. I reject the characterization of my platform with regards to Americans of Hispanic descent because my platform is that we enforce the laws. Look, there's no one running in America that's more pro-legal immigration than I am. My parents were immigrants. My grandparents were immigrants. My wife's parents were immigrants. I've grown up around immigration my whole life. I think immigration is an important part of our heritage and a key part of our future economically. I just don't think America can be the only country in the world that does not enforce its immigration laws. And what I've said is that the immigration laws need to be followed and that we need to have a legal immigration system that works. Now, unfortunately, in politics today, we resort to the characterizations of people's political positions. You've heard that already here today, talk of extremism and things of that nature. The things I believe in are pretty simple to understand. I believe that the economy doesn't grow because of politicians. It grows because of people that start businesses or expand existing businesses. I believe our government cannot continue to spend more money than it takes in. And I believe the world is a safer and better place when America is the strongest country in the world. These are the things that I believe in. These are the things I'll stand for if, God willing, I'm elected to the U.S. Senate 2 weeks from today.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. Michael Williams.
Gentlemen, issues of character and integrity consistently come up among Floridians, many of whom say that all politicians are the same. I want to ask each of you about specific issues that have come up in your background. Beginning with you, Mr. Meek, at one point you tried to help land federal money for a developer, Dennis Stackhouse, now facing federal charges on unrelated matters, I might add. All that at a time when your mother, former Congresswoman Carrie Meek, was being paid a sizable consultant fee by Mr. Stackhouse and provided a luxury car for her use. You claimed at one point to not be aware of at least some of those ties. Why is that, number one? And why should anybody consider that any more than typical business as usual in Washington by you?
Well, the bottom line is that my track record doesn't speak to anything that's unethical or off color. I think it's important to note that I've been a state trooper in this state, voted for every ethics bill that has come before the state legislature or the House of Representatives, and led into Congress as it relates to culture and corruption and cronyism. Bottom line is that I represent a poverty district. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for the United States Senate, to make sure that we have leadership that will put people back to work. And when it comes down to the situation dealing with Mr. Stackhouse, the state attorney is doing what she has to do, and I support her in that effort. But I think it's very, very important for Floridians to know that I'm a working elected official, someone that's going to dive into problems and deal with them. And I think it's very, very important to also note that this state needs strong leadership that has integrity. And that's the reason why I took the time to go throughout this great state of ours, getting signatures, looking Floridians in the eye, and asking them to sign a petition to place my name on the ballot. That's the reason why I won the primary, and that's the reason why I'm going to win this general election, because I'm connected to the everyday Floridians. I'm a public servant, and I'm not a politician.
Mr. Meek, in 5 or 10 seconds, should you have known more about those ties? Should you have avoided them altogether, yes or no?
Well, let me just say this. I think it's very, very important to note that had to do it all over again, would have paid closer attention to what was going on, but I can tell you there's no improprieties there as far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Meek, thank you. Mr. Rubio, you, among other things, have had to pay back at one point some years ago, about 2 years ago, $16,000 in personal expenses run up on a Florida Republican Party issued credit card, personal expenses. You had a home in Tallahassee at one point near foreclosure. You champion yourself as a watchdog of the federal budget. Why, given your own that you will indeed be a good watchdog for the federal purse?
Well, let me set the record straight. My personal expenses have never been paid for by the Republican Party. Anything that's personal, I've paid for out of my own pocket.
You did put them on a GOP-issued credit card at one point.
But I paid for them out of my own pocket. Now, clearly, if I had a chance to do those things again, we'd handle it all very differently. But the bottom line, and the most important thing to understand, is that I have never had personal expenses paid for by the Republican Party. I have always paid for them out of my own pocket. Now, these are important issues, and we should discuss them. But they can't be the only issue in this campaign. And let me tell you the issues that are not being discussed. We are now literally halfway through this debate. We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day. And on question after question, this panel has answered. We have not heard a plan. Now, at least Congressman Meek has a voting record. But we have not heard a serious plan on Medicare, by my count, on Social Security, on the health care package, even when pressed. And let me tell you why that matters. This election can't be like the other ones because the stakes are too generational. They're too high. We are literally deciding what kind of country our children are going to inherit. We are on the verge of being the first generation of Americans to leave the next generation of Americans worse off. And we're not going to fix that by sending typical politicians to Washington that are willing to look into a camera and say or do whatever they have to say or do just to win the next election. We already have too many people like that in Washington, D.C.
And yet, Mr. Crist's character and integrity and judgment do go into those qualities of who will be our next United States Senator. You, Mr. Crist, pushed over the strong objections of Republican Party leaders in our state for Jim Greer as chairman of the Florida Republican Party. Greer now faces charges involving alleged misuse of hundreds of thousands of dollars of party donations, and yet you stood by him to the very, very end. Why did you do so? What does it say about your judgment and your ability to make decisions about the kind of people you put around yourself?
You do the very best you can when you're picking people, whether it's to help out my former political party, an agency in Tallahassee as a secretary head, or a judge for the Florida Supreme Court. And that applies in every instance and in every appointment that I have made. And when you do the best that you can, sometimes you're disappointed. And that happens from time to time. It happened to Governor Jeb Bush. He appointed a guy to be the head of the Department of Corrections who ended up getting arrested after he was indicted and is now in prison. It happens. All you can do is the very best that you can. But I do want to talk about what has happened as it relates to my Republican opponent. You know, there's an expression in Washington called pay to play. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me relate it to you and the possibility of what it means here in Florida. When the Speaker was Speaker of the Florida House, he had a home here in Miami in South Florida. It was for sale. And before that sale took place, he was on the other side of a personal injury protection issue. It was a Dr. Saracita that he ended up selling the home to that had an interest in that issue. Once he sold the home for $380,000 cash, the Speaker's position on the issue changed, and all of a sudden, miraculously, that bill went through.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Crist.
what we don't need in Washington.
Mr. Rubio?
I need to address that. Let me set the record straight on that, first of all, and then tell you why this is happening and why you're hearing these kinds of outrageous attacks from the government.
It's happening because it was in the Sarasota Herald Tribune just about a week ago.
Thank you. Let me set the record straight for the governor, and then I'll tell you guys why this is happening. You guys are watching at home and watching this display.
It's happening because you deserve to know what each of us stand for and where we are on the issues. The election
Let's let Mr. Rubio respond.
Let's set the record. First of all, what the governor said is categorically false about the sale. If you want the gory details, you can go on our website, marcorubio.com. It's all outlined there. The house was an arm's-length transaction. The gentleman's mom still lives in the home. We actually reduced the price of the home. It had been for sale for months, and my position did not change. Subsequent to the sale of that property, the PIP legislation the governor's talking about failed to pass in the Florida House, and it didn't pass for months later until a deal was cut with the Senate to fix it. Now let's talk about why this is happening. Because the governor's running on this idea that he's some sort of a centrist, saying he wants to go to Washington and change the tone of Washington, and yet in front of a live audience in this state, he's just launched a vicious personal attack against me based on a falsehood. Why is this happening? No, I'm telling you, please, because this was a personal attack directly at me. Why is this happening? It's because the governor is not. The governor's not a common sense conservative.
It's not a personal attack.
The governor switched parties after he took a poll. It was documented. You talk about newspapers, Governor. The St. Pete Times had a reporter with Governor Crist on the day he switched parties. And you know what the last call he made before he switched parties was? To his pollster. And when his pollster told him that he had a better chance to win as an independent than as a Republican,
let's move on. I'm going to have to take control here. Let's take control of the personal attacks and move on to some more substance. Miriam, please.
So I'll practice on the filibuster over there. Let's get into serious business with the war on terror. We talk about the generational stakes. I think Mr. Rubio brought that up. As far as the cost, let's look at the war on terror, when do we know the public support is starting to wane? We've been in this now for 9 years. When do we know that we've done what we need to do and get out? What will it look like, and when will it happen? We'll start with Mr. Rubio.
Well, first of all, let's understand what the goal has to be in Afghanistan. The goal in Afghanistan is to have a stable Afghan government and a strong civil society that can support it. That's the goal in Afghanistan. The reason why that's important, by the way, it's not just because of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a neighbor with Pakistan, a country that possesses a nuclear weapon. And the fact is that if Afghanistan were to fall, or evolve into chaos, or somehow fall into the hands of extremists, it would be a base of operations to destabilize and ultimately overthrow the government in Pakistan. And if a radical Islamic regime were to take control in Pakistan, you will have immediately a radical Islamic regime in possession of a nuclear weapon. What's the United States' role in this? I think General Petraeus and the President have it right. The role is to provide security and safety so that an Afghan government can take root, so that a civil society can take root, and the Afghan people can begin to govern themselves. That is the goal in Afghanistan. And the stakes are extraordinarily high, and I think it's important for our leaders to explain that to people. I don't support, as the governor does and Congressman Meek do, a arbitrary withdrawal from the region. I think it's important that we be successful in that region, and I think when you announce to the enemy that you'll be leaving in a date certain, you open yourself up to failure.
All right. Mr. Crist, same question.
Same question?
We'll keep the same question.
Well, we actually agree pretty much on this point. You know, the most important thing that government can do is make sure that we're safe and secure. The Founding Fathers understood it. They put it in the very first line of the Constitution to ensure domestic tranquility. Now, the war on terrorism must continue until we are safe and secure. Now, recently we've heard reports about the possibility of terrorist attacks in Europe. And we suffered severely as a nation when this occurred in New York City and in Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon. So I think what the President is trying to do in Afghanistan is right. And one of the things that encourages me the most about that policy presently is that General Petraeus is the man that's leading our troops on the ground in Afghanistan. Now, it would be laudable and it would be good if we would be able to withdraw those troops next summer, which is a goal that the administration has expressed. However, I would be cautionary there and say that the only way that that could occur is if General Petraeus and others on the ground in Afghanistan have the facts and the circumstances at that time that support that withdrawal. Otherwise, if we have to stay and make sure that America continues to be safe and secure, it is the first and foremost thing that we need to do as a nation.
We only have 4 minutes until the closing argument, so let's try to see if we can keep our answers straight.
Mr. Meek has the same question to answer.
Thank you so very much. And as you can see, both of my opponents agree with the approach in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I'm the only candidate on this stage that's actually been to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq. And I've talked to our men and women in harm's way. God bless them and their family, because they've been deployed over the last 10 years. It's not about how long we're going to stay in. It's how long our coalition partners will stay with us. And it's very, very important that we continue to work with Secretary of State Clinton, also working with President Obama and General Petraeus in keeping that coalition together. We can't do it alone like we tried to do in Iraq. This is not just about America, it's about the world. I think it's also important to note that we can, stay there, and what I'm hearing my opponents say, stay there as long as you can. So I want to say to all the military families that are watching us right now, do understand what you're going through. A lot of folks don't like to talk about that. They don't like to talk about the fact that we have mothers and fathers that have missed several birthdays, several weddings, several funerals because they're serving this country. That's the reason why I was endorsed by the Veterans of Foreign Wars, because they know I understand those issues, the PAC, the Political Action Committee. I think it's important that we have policy that's sound, but also looking at the cost of it.
Thank you, Mr.
And I think that's so very, very important when we look at this debate.
I am going to ask you to keep your answers to 30 seconds of this final set of questions in order to make it in time for the closing statements.
All right. First, Mr. Crist, on immigration. You've advocated a path to citizenship for immigrants who are here illegally. One of your opponents, Marco Rubio, says that's no more than code for amnesty. But let me ask you to imagine that instead of this audience, you were speaking to a group of people who had waited years to enter this country legally. How do you defend that, what you advocate to that group?
Well, what I'm more concerned about is what's best for Florida and what's best for America. We have, according to different estimates, 11 to 14 million people that are here that are not legal citizens as of yet. It seems to me, number one, what we need to do is secure our border. fundamental, important, must be done. But I also do agree that we need to have a path to citizenship that is provided to these people that are here. It's what President Bush wanted to do. It's what Senator McCain and Kennedy wanted to do, and Senator Mel Martinez, and it was the right approach.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we have to move on if the other candidates will have a chance to respond.
Thank you.
Mr. Meek, you've been in Congress for 8 years, the last 4 in the majority as part of the majority party. In that time, nobody thinks our problem with illegal immigration has been solved. Nobody thinks our border has been made secure. In fact, it's widely seen now as a national security problem. How long is it going to take? Why hasn't it happened?
Well, when I get to the Senate, it will happen. And I can tell you what the problem has been. It's been the United States Senate looking at polls, and every time they approach protecting our borders, comprehensive immigration reform, making sure that there's a pathway to status in this country, and going after those employers that keep the U.S. worker home, and making sure that it's comprehensive and fair to our law enforcement officers. Mr. Rubio would like to see stalling this comprehensive immigration reform, saying we want to protect our borders. We've been wanting to protect our borders for the last 15 years. We have to move forward. Thank you.
And Mr. Rubio, you've already spoken a bit on immigration. You are opposed to the DREAM Act, which would allow citizenship for illegal immigrants who attend college or who join the armed services. Now, let me ask you also to pretend you've got an imaginary audience. This one made up of illegal immigrants who are in uniform, part of the United States services, just returned from a deployment in Afghanistan. Tell them why they shouldn't be citizens.
Well, actually, William, what I've supported and have continued to say is that children that were brought here by their parents, brought here when they were young children, have grown up in this country their entire lives, have done well in school, want to continue their education and contribute to our country, or serve in the military, I am in favor of helping to accommodate them, become integrated into American society legally, as part of a modernization of our legal immigration system. The problem with the DREAM Act is it goes well beyond that. It actually extends to people up to 35 years of age. It could apply to upwards of 2 million people in our country.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio. We need to proceed immediately to the closing statements. Because of the toss, you were the first to address the audience.
Thank you very much to Leadership Florida and to all of you for being here today and all of you who have tuned in. You know, I got into this race 18 months ago against some pretty significant odds. A lot's happened since over the last 18 months, but the one thing that hasn't changed is what this election is all about. This election is about the future of our country. It's about what kind of nation we're going to leave our children. And the choice before us is very clear. We will either be the first Americans ever to leave our children worse off than ourselves, or we will allow our children to be the most prosperous and freest Americans that have ever lived. Now that choice is up to us. It's up to the decisions we're making right now, and it's what this election is all about. You see, the road that has us on, a road that my opponents both support, is the wrong direction. It is a road that will rob us of our exceptionalism. But if we are willing to send people to Washington, D.C. to stand up to that and offer a clear alternative, an alternative that does what all the Americans before us have done, to confront and truly, seriously solve the challenges of our time, we're going to be able to leave our children with that better country.
Thank you, Mr. Rubio.
I'm ready, and I'm asking for your vote.
Mr. Crist.
Thank you. I want to thank Leadership Florida for this evening, as well as Nova Southeastern University for sponsoring. I'm running for the United States Senate as an independent for you. I'm running as an independent because Washington is broken. It is enamored with gridlock, finger-pointing, and arguing all day long, and they can't get anything done for you, the people that are watching tonight. And it's very frustrating to me. As your governor, we've been able to get things done for the people of Florida, and that's very important. I think what we need to do is realize that there's an extreme right candidate in this race, Mr. Rubio. He's proud of it. He says he's a Tea Party guy, and he wears it as a badge of honor, and that's okay. But I don't agree with those values. I think that women should have the opportunity to make their own decision about their life as it relates to Roe versus Wade. He wants to overturn it. I think that senior citizens deserve to have a United States Senator that will defend them and protect and preserve Social Security as we know it today. I will do that for you. And we got to defend our teachers and education in the classroom.
Mr. Crist.
I'm humbly asking for your vote.
Your time is
next Tuesday
We need to
night.
move on. Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, and I'm glad that we had this debate tonight. Earlier today, I was with President Bill Clinton over in St. Petersburg, and I will be with him in Orlando tomorrow, talking about a clear vision for Florida in this country. I'm glad that the 42nd President stands with me because he stands with Americans. I think it's important to note in this debate there's a clear choice. I'm the only pro-choice candidate in this race. I'm the only candidate that stands up for working men and working women. I'm the only candidate that went up against Tallahassee for smaller class sizes. I'm the only candidate that's actually fought against the Bush administration when they wanted to privatize Social Security. And I am the only candidate that will stand up to oil companies that want to drill off the coast of Florida. There may be issues we may disagree with, but one thing that I will not be mistaken on is not being able to have a clear vision for Florida and not standing up for you. I want to be your next United States Senator. I ask you to vote for me during this early voting period and let the world know, in Florida, we stand with those that stand with us. When you vote, we all win. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek, and our thanks to everyone who has participated in this debate tonight. That concludes this important debate. We ask you all to please vote on November 2nd. Thank you for watching tonight. Have a good night.
Decision 2010 Before You Vote is a special election year series brought to you by Leadership Florida, putting Florida first. The Florida Press Association, the trade association for Florida's newspapers, providing communities across Florida with the news and information relevant to their life. With underwriting by Nova Southeastern University, a private not-for-profit research university. The Florida Association of Insurance Agents, your trusted choice. You need an independent insurance agent. The Florida League of Mayors, the trusted voice of our communities. AARP Florida, the power to make it better. The Claude Pepper Center and Foundation, dedicated to enhancing the well-being of Florida's seniors and preserving American democracy. And the Florida Philanthropic Network, building philanthropy to build a better Florida.